Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. A lot of people forgot, but very soon after Marvel Dice Masters was originally announced, was it over a year ago at this point? Something like that. They had also announced Yu-Gi-Oh! Dice Masters, and it was supposed to be out much sooner, but of course there were tons of delays with all of the Dice Masters line of products, and I think that once Marvel Dice Masters really hit big, WizKids just wanted to focus on getting that into production and getting more of them into stock as possible, and they just wanted to focus on that. But eventually, Yu-Gi-Oh! Dice Masters did come out, and I have it in my hands here. Now, as far as my history with Yu-Gi-Oh!, I actually played the card game very briefly. I actually just more wanted to. There was a period of time, like in my late teens, not even early 20s, I think at that point, that I really just wanted to collect a lot of CCGs and other trading card games. So I was even out of Magic by that point because I really only played Magic in high school and junior high. And I just was still collecting Magic cards. And it was kind of the same thing with Yu-Gi-Oh! And a lot of other second and third tier CCGs like Rage and all that. So I was really just doing it for that. But I played the game a few times and it was okay. It was very simple. But I liked the idea of having these huge monsters coming out and just buffing them up and getting them bigger and bigger and having monsters that combine like with polymorph. That was really cool to me. So thematically it appealed to me. I read some of the manga, and the early issues of the manga were okay before it actually had the card game. The way it happened was that the manga was introduced. In the manga, the characters started playing this card game with all these different monsters, and then at some point, then the anime came out, and then the card game was produced, and that took off like way bigger than any of the other properties involved with the license. But I digress. Now that you have the Yu-Gi-Oh! Dice Masters, the same theme where you have all these different monsters that, monster cards with dice attached to them. As far as the gameplay goes, and I'll mention this in the overview as well, it is exactly the same as the other Dice Masters set, and it should be because they're all supposed to be compatible and work together. But there are a couple of technical quirks to this game that are different from the other Dice Masters sets, or at least the ones that we've seen so far. So let's go ahead and take a brief overview of just the stuff that comes in this starter set, which is only for 2 players. I'm not going to go over the rules of the game again. You can go back and watch my original Dice Masters review if you want to see how the game plays. Then we're going to come back and I'll tell you what I think about this starter set. Alright, I'm just going to do a quick overview of the stuff that comes in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Dice Masters, the starter set. I'm not going to go over a detailed explanation of the game because the gameplay is exactly the same as the other Dice Masters set, and probably will be the same as the Dice Masters sets that have yet to be released. This set is based on, thematically, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Well, okay, I was going to say the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game, but really based on the artwork that they use, which is still shots from the animated series, I'll say it's based off of Yu-Gi-Oh! The animated series. Maybe that's all that WizKids had the right to do. So the gameplay is exactly the same, and you can see that it starts with a lot of the same stuff that comes in the Marvel Dice Masters starter sets, the 2 that they have out now, the Uncanny X-Men and Avengers vs. X-Men. You have a bunch of the starter dice, which have the sidekicks and all the different energy sides. You have these 2 very crappy but usable bags to put your dice in while you're playing. You have the colored action cards where you'll put the randomized action cards that you use onto, together with the dice necessary in order to actually purchase and activate those cards. A rule book and a check sheet. It comes with 10 unique basic action cards, and then you have 8 of the monsters. In the Yu-Gi-Oh! Game, if you're not familiar with the universe, it's basically a bunch of anime kids playing a card game in the show that eventually becomes a card game. Like, it was a manga, then it was an anime, and then somewhere in there they actually created a card game based on the card game that the kids were playing in the story, and that totally trumped everything else. Like, it became immensely popular. So the character cards, quote-unquote, that you have here are actually the monsters that the characters in the show summon with their cards, and like the holograms come out. I don't know. It's a whole thing. Now here's a very important difference between the Yu-Gi-Oh! Dice Master starter set and the previous starter sets from Marvel Dice Masters. In the previous starter sets, you had 8 different characters, the same way that you do now, but each one of them had 3 variations, meaning there was actually 3 character cards for every character, so there was 3 Hulk cards or 3 Wolverine cards, whatever it might be. The dice were exactly the same, and you had the same amount of them, 2 dice for each of those characters, but the abilities on the cards were different. Now for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Starter set, you only have 1 card for every character, and then the 2 dice. There is a reason for this. The reason is that even though all the Dice Master sets are going to have collectible cards, for Yu-Gi-Oh!, and I'm not sure if the next sets for the other properties are going to be the same, but for Yu-Gi-Oh!, the dice are collectible as well. Each die is going to be specifically numbered and coded, so let me go ahead and show you that. There's a tiny, I'm sure you won't be able to see it that well, but there is a tiny little number on each of the die, and those match up to the cards. There'll be that same number on the cards. Hence, that is the reason why there's only 8 character cards total in this game, because otherwise there would have had to have been a lot more dice, and I'll talk more about that in my final thoughts. But let's go ahead and show you the 8 monsters that come with the game, then I'll show you 5 of the 10 basic action cards. I don't want to spend too much time on this. So first you have the iconic Blue Eyes White Dragon, who says that when this monster attacks, if you have the burst symbol, your opponent knocks out 1 of his or her monsters. 2 bursts, when this monster attacks, your opponent loses life equal to the level of his or her highest levels monsters. And here is an example of the Blue Eyes White Dragon die, complete with the serial number, the 001. Then you have the Celtic Guardian. These are all the really iconic monsters that were actually in like the first season of the show. And you notice the still shots of the show. When this monster attacks alone, it gets +2 defense. Burst symbol gets +1 defense for each lightning bolt energy monster in the field, both players. You have the Dark Magician, who is probably one of my favorite characters when I was actually into Yu-Gi-Oh! When summoned, you may pay 2 life to draw and roll 2 dice. You have the Harpy Lady, a very odd choice, but if 1 or more sidekicks attacks either players, this monster gets +1 attack and +1 defense. Burst symbol, when this monster attacks, up to 3 sidekicks get +1 attack. Kuribo, a fan favorite. Burst symbol, during your attack step, if this monster is assigned enough damage to knock it out, your non-Kuribo monsters do not get knocked out this turn. That could potentially be very powerful. Lejin, the Mystic Genie of the Lamp. When summoned, knock out up to 2 opposing sidekicks. Burst symbol, when this monster knocks out another monster, your opponent loses a life. The Red Eyes Black Dragon. While active, lightning bolt monsters cost 2 energy less for you to buy. Burst symbol, when summoned, move 1 die from your opponent's prep area into the used pile. And finally, the Time Wizard, the most questionably useful. If summoned, name a die and draw a card, or draw a die from your bag. If it matches, add it to your prep area, otherwise return it to your bag. Burst symbol, when this monster gets knocked out, you may knock out a strength monster with cost 4 or less. Now let's just take a look at 5 of the basic action cards of the 10 of them that are based on some of the most iconic trap cards, trap and spell cards from the game. You have Swords of Revealing Light. Choose 1 monster. That monster can't attack until the start of your next turn. Global ability, pay 1 of the vigilante symbols. Target monster cannot block this turn. Mystic Box. Choose an opposing monster. Your opponent draws a die. If it is a monster, replace the chosen monster with that die at its lowest level. Otherwise, return the die to the bag. Global ability, pay a shield. Swap the attack value of 1 of your monsters with that of an opposing monster. Monster Reborn. Roll a monster from your used pile. If it rolls a monster face, summon it at no cost. Otherwise, place the die in your bag. Mirror Force, one of my favorite cards from the actual card game. Knock out a level 1 monster, 2 burst symbols, knock out a level 1 or 2 monster instead. Pay a fist to target blocked monster, deals no damage. That's the global ability. And finally, Change of Heart. At the start of your attack step, take control of an opponent's monster with a level lower than one of your monsters. Attack with it. Burst symbol, instead you may take control of a monster of equal level. And that is a basic overview of what comes in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Dice Master set. Same exact gameplay, as far as I can tell, of the original Dice Masters rule set from the Marvel Dice Masters, and probably the same rule set that will be used for all the Dice Masters products to come. But of course, there were a few little foibles, let's say, to this game that the other game sets did not have. Let's talk about that in my final thoughts. Okay, this is one of the rare reviews where I'm going to start off talking about the mechanics of the game rather than the theme and the components. And mechanically speaking, like I already said a couple of times, this is Dice Masters. It's the exact same system. Of course, they all have to be compatible, so that's not a surprise. And it, just like the original Dice Masters, it plays very well. I like it. It's a fun game. The monster cards that are here, which are the, we'll just call them character cards, There's some really interesting ones. The Blue Eyes White Dragon seems really, really powerful, but of course he's kind of tough to get out. Same thing with the Red Eyes Black Dragon. But then you have cards like the Dark Magician, which is kind of fun because you can pay life to get more dice. The Time Wizard seems a little bit unwieldy. I wasn't able to make him work very well, the whole essentially guessing for dice, but it's a cool, interesting mechanic that's sort of outside of the bounds of some of the other cards that I've seen playing Dice Masters. And then you've got some cards like the Genie, which are pretty powerful as well, but sort of selectively so. But there's a good mix of characters here for you to use. Same thing with the basic action cards. I like that the basic action cards are based off of the spell and trap cards from the original sets. You have the Unpredictable Magic Box. You have, well, unpredictable perhaps for your foe. Then you have the Change of Heart, which lets you take control of an opponent's monster. The Monster Reborn, which potentially lets you free summon, which I guess is essentially what happens with the Monster Reborn card from the original Yu-Gi-Oh game. You can just free summon a monster from your graveyard. So there's some cool and, I say to some degree, thematic cards based on the Yu-Gi-Oh series in this set. And if that was all that we were talking about, I would give this set a recommendation with no problem because it's just fun. There's a couple of things that this set does that are super stupid. It's the best way I can describe it. I don't like to be so blunt like that. And uncouth, but there's two things. One is the collectability aspect here. Now, every Dice Master set is going to have collectible cards. You buy booster packs for both of the Marvel Dice Master sets, and those are going to get you a couple of cards and the dice that go along with them. The cards are going to be randomized. There's like a bunch of different Spider-Man cards, a bunch of different Mystique cards. Same thing in the starter set. So the original starter set, like I said in the overview, had there's 8 different heroes or villains, and 3 of each of those cards. So there's a lot of variability, but they all use the same pair of dice that comes with that starter set. And then you can get more dice through the booster packs and more cards, but the dice will always stay the same. In fact, they had like Red Hulk and Green Hulk. You could even use, even though they look different, you could use the Red Hulk dice and the Green Hulk dice interchangeably for the Red Hulk and Green Hulk cards because the dice faces were the same. Not anymore, not for Yu-Gi-Oh at least. In Yu-Gi-Oh, the dice are keyed to the card, meaning that there's a little serial number on, I don't know if you call it a serial number, but there's a number on the dice that matches up to a particular card. And that is why there are only 8 character cards total in this set, which is a real bummer compared to the other starter sets. It's much less variability. At least they could have done for the starter set was say, okay, you're going to randomize the dice, which is really stupid and annoying. Fine, but at least for the starter set, can we get a bunch of cards that can work with these dice? No, you can't. This is all that you get. It doesn't make the starter set totally broken. You can still have some fun with it, but it is clearly inferior to the Marvel Dice Master sets and the Uncanny X-Men and the Avengers vs. X-Men. And that whole thing going forward of having collectible dice and cards, it's just... It doesn't make any sense to me. Okay, I guess it makes sense because it's money. It's more and more and more booster packs that people have to buy and more secondary market stuff that they have to buy, but come on. Was it not enough to have just the randomized cards? Unless I'm interpreting this wrong and it's not going to be as bad as I think, this seems really, really ill-conceived. And then, this is more of a shallow thing. So, you know, if you want to criticize me for this and say it's not a big deal, fine. The cards use still shots of the animated Yu-Gi-Oh series. And when I say still shots, it's like they literally took a picture of the screen from back when the show originally aired. They look awful. They are low-res, blurry, junky, crappy-looking shots. I don't know if that came across on my camera while I was showing you the cards, but it's terrible. It looks completely unprofessional in the year 2015. How did this happen? Especially since the game was delayed. They had the most time in the world to like make new art. And I know that art's expensive, but come on. You know this is going to be very successful. You're not willing to invest some money. Even if there has to be something going on where they had the rights to the animated usage of the show in North America, but not the card game. Like, maybe they didn't actually have a license with Konami. I don't know. I don't know all the details of that. But if they did, if they were able to use the card art, that would have been fantastic. Fine, I don't care if you reuse the art from the cards. A lot of the art from the cards looks pretty good. If you like anime style, which I do, I would have been perfectly happy with that. I would not be complaining. But they're using garbage-looking still shots from a, what is it, 15-year-old series at least? So bad. I mean, you're looking, I mean, granted, it doesn't matter for the theme, but you're looking at these cards the whole time. Don't you want it to be attractive? I mean, I think all the artwork for Marvel Dice Masters was brand new. Even if they had reused it like DC Comics deck building game does. I don't care, that would have been something. This just looks like garbage, and it looks like they put no time into it whatsoever. The dice are fine, I guess, but compared to the cards, no way. So I really think that they just phoned this in. I don't know why. I don't know why they couldn't be bothered to put more effort into it, but from the fact that the art looks like crap, and from the fact that they're making you purchase more and more and more of it just to get the dice that you need for the randomized dice for the randomized cards, if that's how they're going to do it, I can't recommend diving into Yu-Gi-Oh! Dice Masters. If you just want to buy the base set for more stuff to mix in with your existing Dice Master stuff, okay, I think I might even keep it just for that, but I do not anticipate going through any of the booster packs like I did for Marvel Dice Masters, because it's just too much of a pain and it just looks like junk. They really should have tried harder with this one. Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.